our regiments of infantry no support. And we knew what that was going to be. We were going to be a labor battalion. We were going to be digging ditches, building roads, and all this other backbreaking stuff. Well, when the war broke out, the British and the French were trying to get the U.S. Army to fight under their flag. And we said, no, we ain't going to have this. We're fighting under our own flag. Our boys aren't fighting under some other country's flag. Now, when they started this, when the war started for the United States, we had a dilemma. We needed more men. So volunteering was okay, but Persians thought that we needed to have millions of men in this war. So they enacted the draft. They ended up drafting, or not drafting, but there was over 23.5 million men that registered for the draft. And out of that 23.5, 2.3 million of those men were of African American descent. Now the government had a dilemma. You know, when the war started, they didn't feel that we were needed in this war. They felt that what they had was going to suffice. So what are we going to do with these 2.3 million men that now signed up for the draft? Well, they decided they were going to put us in labor battalions. Hence, you have the 93rd Provision. Well, the French and the British are clamoring for manpower. They want the United States Army to fight for them. We say no, but to appease the French, they take the 93rd and they say, here, we have a division that we can give you, and it's the 93rd. So with that being said, we were allowed to keep our American uniforms, but then we had to turn in our kit. We had to turn in our belts, we had to turn in our canteen, we had to turn in our helmet, and we had to turn in our rifles to use the French gear. Hence the difference in our appearance and the difference in our gear. Now, in this war, we'll do this. I got a crowd over here. In this war, we're going to count off. I've got, should I do this? I think I will. I got a crowd, and I think it's going to work. So I'm going to count with y'all. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Now remember your numbers. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And 1 and 2. Now all the threes, come up here and join me. I need all my threes. Now, I don't want you ones and twos. Sir, I need you over here facing me, not see, you're part of this. You're facing this, you're not just looking at me. All right, I want you three, I want you ones and twos to know, I don't have anything against you. It's not that they're better looking than you guys are, they have more money than you do, has nothing to do with any of that. The reason why my number threes are here, when our regiment started, at the beginning of the war, we had 3,500 men in our regiment. We were in France for 10 months. In that 10 months, we lost 1,300 men. They were either wounded or killed, never made it back home. These number threes that I have here with me are those fallen comrades right here. So just think about it. This many people didn't make it back home out of all y'all. So, my number threes. We were also some of the highest decorated units in the war. And what you have to understand about these African American regiments, remember I told you, the United States government didn't think we were needed. So they gave the 93rd to the French. With that being said, the French took us with open arms. They had no problems fighting with African Americans. They had no problems fighting with blacks. I mean, they were fighting with the Senegalese, they were fighting with the North Africans and other African Americans, Africans that were in Africa. They had no problem. And when they were giving us, they took us with open arms. They had no problems fighting with these American soldiers. They needed us, and more importantly, they liked us. Now, when we're talking about these men, one of the reasons why we were against being part of a labor battalion, and you're talking about the individual soldiers, and the African American leadership in this country was against it. And the reason for that was they felt that we should be out there on the front lines fighting, because if we did so with distinction, it would earn us the right to be a citizen of this country. Even though the 14th Amendment had already been, enacted, it would have proved to this country that we were just as much a citizen as anybody else. And in that, everybody talks about the 369th. Everybody talks about Henry Johnson fighting off 30 Germans with a knife, winning the Croix de Guerre, eventually getting the Medal of Honor. Everybody talks about them being on the line for 191 days before they were pulled. I talk about the 372nd. They were behind the 369th in the war. We won over 170 Croix de Guerre in our regiment. The Legion of Merit Award, dozens upon dozens of those. I guess the French were just throwing them away like candy. As far as the Americans went, Purple Hearts we were awarded by the pounds, and then we also won several of the distinguished service awards. So we were very, very highly decorated fighting with the French. Now, I would sit here and I would love to have all y'all's attention and spend all my time talking, but see, when we're talking about history, we always have this proverbial but, and this is one of them. See, I got this guy standing over here, and he's looking at me. And you know what he's saying to me? I can feel it in the back of my head. Hurry up, Private Mack. I got something to say too. Now, I'm going to introduce. You want to introduce yourself to him?
Yeah, I introduced myself.
Come on, no, get up. Oh, you're number 3? Number 3s, you guys were released to go back. You guys are all right now. Number 3s, let's hear it for the number 3s. Yeah, you're there.
Y'all hear me?
Yes, sir.
So, my name is Private Carter, and I represent the 805th Pioneer Infantry Regiment. Now, remember all that stuff he said before about not wanting to be in a labor battalion and all the wars they won? My unit is the opposite of that. 805th Pioneer Infantry, what we did, even though we had infantry in our name, I actually spent more time carrying a shovel, an axe, or a pickaxe. And the idea behind it is that as Pioneer Infantry, even though I have infantry in my unit's name, I have the capability to fight, but most of my work is supposed to be almost essentially what we consider combat engineer work. So building roads, building ammunition dumps, repairing roads, repairing trenches, and pretty much clearing the way for the force that would come behind the infantry as well as other engineers. And then when the war ended, part of my job would actually be going out and reinterning bodies that were basically left on the battlefield. And so whereas Private Mack, being part of the 372nd, would have saw combat under the French, would have been awarded many awards, Pioneer Infantry guys, we didn't get that same level of admiration. We mostly did a lot of the infrastructure to help the war go on. And then after the war ended, trying to help repair the countries that were destroyed by the war. That's pretty much it, though.
Well, he's a lot shorter winded than I am, and I can still go on with this thing. But remember that proverbial but that we talked about before? These guys over here want to say something to you too. Now I gotta warn y'all. Watch him, but definitely watch them. If y'all have wallets, put your hand on them while they're up here talking. Now, y'all want to introduce yourselves? Come on up here.
So my name is Private Sheffield. We're with the 16th Infantry Division. Now, our uniforms are the same, but a little bit different, as you can tell. We're representing the punitive expedition of 1916. Now, it wasn't just 1916. It goes all the way back from 1910, goes into the 1920s. But in 1916 specifically, the U.S. was supporting different sides in a three-sided civil war in Mexico. All right, and eventually tensions geared up with Pancho Villa, who many of you may know the name of. And as we stopped supporting him, he began several raids on civilians and cavalry troops in the U.S.-Mexican border region. Eventually, I believe it was the spring of 1916, we started sending troops over for a punitive expedition to stop Pancho Villa from crossing into United States and try to stabilize Mexico a bit. This is happening at the exact same time that the British, French, Germans, Austrians, all of the different nations in Europe are fighting over there on the Western Front, Eastern Front, and in the Mediterranean theater with the Ottomans as well. Some of the troops that fought in the punitive expedition will end up going to Europe in 1917, 1918, and then for the occupation period for a few years afterwards. But this is kind of the predecessor to the troops that are going to fight in World War I.
Thank you. Now, we're talking a little bit about these African American soldiers that served. And I had mentioned earlier that we did not want to be in a labor battalion. We wanted to show this country that we were just as much a citizen as everybody else. Now, what happened after this war was over, these men come back with all these decorations, wearing these uniforms, and in some communities they were told not to walk down the streets in these uniforms. And for some of these men, they were actually hung for wearing an American uniform in our beautiful country of ours. And with that, when we look at these men, there were a couple of things that happened in 1917. They took 1,250 African American men. They took them to Boise, Idaho, to Fort Boise. 1,000 of those men were students, businessmen, some clergy, as well as others. The other 250 were members of the 4 Buffalo Soldier regiments, NCOs. This was the first time we had an African American officers candidate school in this country. These 4 men would form the backbone of the junior officers that served in these 2 regiments that fought over in Europe. When these men came home, as well as other men that came home, and they seen that they weren't getting this citizenship that we were hoping to get, these men start to form what we now call the Civil Rights Movement. This is where you start to see the Civil Rights Movement start to come to life. And we don't see it to come to fruition until the 60s and 70s, when you start to see the marches on Selma and the counter sit-in. So when we're talking about World War I and we're talking about these soldiers, we're talking about punitive expedition, we're actually talking about history. We're not talking to you about guns and rifles, which we can do. What we try to do when we do this thing is try to point out, when we talk about these soldiers, we're talking about more than just automatons that are out there fighting. We're talking about people. If I was to get up in the middle of the night and hit my toe in the edge of my bed, it would hurt just like yours would. If I was to walk over here and drop something on the ground and pick it up and get a thorn in my finger, it would bleed just like yours is. When we go around here and we're seeing these different camps and we're talking to these different people, I don't want you to see these people as warriors, soldiers. I want you to see them as people. People with families, people with potentially future families. I want you to see them as who they are, people. This is what we see out here. And remember my number 3s? This is what it was all about, so that we can do this today. So I want to thank y'all for coming out. And if you guys have any questions, we'd love to answer them. We do have a display over here that we'd love for you guys to come take a look at. And yeah. So any questions about it?